was something I put on, so I'll go ahead and open that discussion up. So what I'm going to want to start with is essentially just I hope, very brief history of EDC.
Commissioner, before we start,
Yes, Commissioner.
is there anyone here that wants to speak concerning this particular issue?
Actually, I thought you were reminding me of something else, but before we get to first off, I think I'm going to roll that into what I should have been asked in the first place. We do appreciate a reminder. Is there anyone here who is wishing to speak? And I'm just going to go down the short list here. Under discussion items, we're already doing that. I see no one. I understand that when we get to our regular agenda, that we will have some people here who are interested in 394, 391, and 392. Is that correct? Is there other people here who would like to speak on those issues?
Those are zoning and subdivision on Logan's Place. Someone here
Yes.
okay, Logan's Place, somebody's here.
I'm sorry, I should have probably mentioned that more than the issue.
In the Clean Energy District, someone's here to speak.
I was aware of that, but that's already the top. Yeah, what I'm trying to do is to place everything towards the front of the agenda that might have someone who is here for a particular issue. But I was aware, of course, of the Missouri Clean Energy people there at the top of the list. On the others, are there any members of the public here who are present to speak on any other issues coming up before the regular agenda? Well, I think we're good, kind of just going through in the order that we have put it.
Commissioner,
Mm-hmm.
is it that there's no one else here to speak concerning the Clay County Economic Development Council? Okay. Can you give me some just broad brush idea of how much time you intend to spend on the discussion?
I think maybe 15 or 20 minutes, something like that. I'm not sure. I don't know that I would want to, because I'm going to first, I think that I don't want to put us in a situation where either of the other two commissioners feels that I'm not going to have enough time to address the issue.
Are we limiting the discussion to the conflict of interest issue, or is this a wider discussion?
It says funding for the Clay County EDC, so that
So
would
it's
be
not
limitations. That would be a limitation right there, so it can go a bit broader than that particular issue. I'm going to, just because some of this history I was unaware of, so I'm just going to go through that real quick just so we have an orientation and then get right to the issue. EDC of Clay County was founded in 1967, so we're coming up on the 50th anniversary. They're a 501c3. As far as anyone else can tell from the inception, the presiding commissioner, or I suppose at that time the judge, has always been on the executive board, and all three commissioners have been on the general board. A little more recent history, 2010, the 2020 task force was formed to help preserve the presence of the Fort Clay Como plant. The Manufacturing Jobs Act was passed in special session in 2010 as a result of a lot of the hard work done by EDC. I myself worked with them pretty closely on that issue when I was a House member. The Brookings Institute recently estimated that the Kansas City region now employs more than 1,800 auto-related workers, and that's an old number. We are number 2 in the auto industry trading hub in North America. In Clay County, again, old number, over 7,000 people employed at the plant. The Manufacturing Jobs Act resulted in about a $1.2 million investment by the state into Clay County's Fort Clay Como plant. 2013, a contract was submitted to EDC and abruptly withdrawn. To quote Mr. Hampton, who is the executive director, the EDC was blindsided. Harsh criticism was leveled at the EDC director, and demands were made by the Commission on specific spending priorities in the contract that was submitted in that era, which, in my opinion, is pretty close to micromanaging what was going on. Shortly after that, the Clay County Economic Development Alliance was formed and funded by the Clay County Commission. By vote of the Clay County Commission, I believe that was unanimous. And then that was followed by, Commissioner Owen had said, quote, The 2013 Commission refuses to stand by while Kansas seeks to rob us of good jobs. This team of commissioners is unanimously committed to taking a hands-on approach to attracting new jobs to our area, as well as holding on to the ones that we already have. The president of the Alliance had concerns raised about working for other communities, which would be a conflict, which would raise a conflict of interest as well as other concerns. On that particular point of conflict of interest, the Commission chose not to act. The Alliance president said the closest thing he had to a political connection was his mother being in the legislature with Commissioner Ridgeway in the 80s. He said he had not even met Commissioner Mason until after she was elected. Later on, the Strategic Planning Committee was formed. Myself and Greg Knudsen were co-chairs on that particular effort. During that, we outlined a plan to move forward on economic development, and what sprang for that were things like the Research Facility Task Force, which was instrumental in the Gladstone Innovative Center, Quality of Life Task Force, which is working on trails, the Angel Investor Initiative, which has invested this year in 4 new companies and hopefully 8 next year. We formed the CEO Roundtables, the Economic Development Boot Camp. It helped with Coffee Connect. The people at iWorks were extremely happy with the aid that EDC was able to provide to help them get off the ground. The CAPS program, Certified Work-Ready Communities were established through that, and we are, I believe, the largest county to have that designation in the state. 2014, I announced my candidacy for presiding commissioner on a commitment to restore the Clay County EDC relationship. I was able to win that election. Funding was restored to the EDC and the Alliance ceased to exist. The Commission applauded the EDC successes, both during 2015 and during most of 2016. And then finally, most recently, during the December 12th meeting of the Clay County budget hearing, Commissioner Owen said, quote, "I make a motion that we hold out the $172,000 to the EDC until the presiding commissioner resigns off the executive board due to a conflict of interest," close quote. The motion was passed with Commissioner Owen and Commissioner Ridgeway voting yes. As in the 2013 ultimatum, this was done without any notice to the EDC or myself. It is, I think, a continuation of what had been an attack on the EDC by the commissioners, with the exception of myself, and that I think that this is an ongoing issue. I think there have been ongoing talks with the EDC. They were unaware of any endangerment of their funding. In fact, they were told it was not necessary that they show up at the budget hearings because their funding would be safe. I think this is an example of some of the bullying tactics and threats that Commissioner Owen typically uses. I don't know if this is what you meant by separating me from the EDC, but I think this is just another surprise attack, and it endangers the ability of the EDC to create economic growth. I don't believe this is necessarily about me because this is an ongoing attack. It's not about me personally, I don't think, in some ways. I don't know that it is about the executive director who was attacked in 2013. I think this is an attempt to compromise the ability of the EDC to move forward and possibly destroy it. The economic development capabilities of this county, I believe, are being used as a political football for petty political squabbles, and that is wrong. This is basically a hostage situation. Neither the EDC nor any other outside agency should be periodically threatened with the loss of funding for political purposes. This disrupts their mission and it is destructive to the process. With that, I will throw it open with the last part of it, at least my comment part of this would be, I believe it's important that we have a free and reasonably independent EDC. Clearly, it is important that we have a presence of the Commission on that to safeguard the investment that the public is making in this, but that does not mean we turn the EDC into a commission puppet. Commissioner Nolte?
Well, I mean, you have error on many sides in this deal. But, you know, I have gotten several complaints about you being over there trying to swing your weight around a lot too much. So, you know, and in the past, you have abstained from voting on anything that the EDC had to say. And the reason why you did that, because you think personally there's a conflict of interest. I think the EDC is doing a heck of a good job. I was willing to include another $25,000 so they could get employment health insurance for their employees if you would resign off the board. And we have a contract with the EDC. Now, whether you resign off the board or not, we can do a contract with them in the future for 2017. They're going to get funded. But, you know, you're not going to be over there swinging your weight around and trying to do everything. It looks like to me you have tried to take credit for everything good this county has done for the last 4 years. EDC is doing a good job.
EDC, please. EDC is before.
EDC
Thank you.
is doing a good job and will continue to do a good job without you on any of their boards.
How many meetings have you attended in the last year, board meetings of the EDC? I mean, outside of political forums and photo ops.
You want to come over there and you swing your weight around and tell them how big you are and everything? You know, you don't need to be on the board and be voting over there. That's why you got to do it to go to the board. It's just going to happen.
I still don't know what the conflict of interest would be.
Why do you keep abstaining? Why do you to vote on anything the EDC has to do it? Apparently you think there's a conflict of interest.
I abstained on one vote, I believe. Still, somebody has to be over there, someone has to be safeguarding the public investment that's being made there. I have had zero complaints from anyone who thinks I've been, as you say, throwing my weight
They don't want
around.
to talk to you about it, but they talk to other people. And I've gotten feedback, so that's the reason.
What would be one of the issues that I used my influence to?
I'm not going to say anymore.
So the conflict of interest is undefined, unknown. I mean, it's a little bit difficult for me to make any kind of comment when there is no substance to the charge. I mean, anybody can say conflict of interest, but there is no backup. There's no documentation. There's not even a specific instance where that was done that I'm aware of. I mean, is this another instance where the charge of conflict of interest is made, no evidence is given, and it is up to me to prove my innocence, not for you to prove the fact that I have some measure of guilt that I'm still struggling with. Surely and is this something that I'm just completely at sea, because there is no way to really push back if you haven't if you've got nothing in the way of evidence, just an ad hominem accusation. Not to mention the fact that it's this specific to me. So if at some future point there's someone else occupying this seat, are we going to go back to that particular arrangement where the presiding commissioner sits on the executive board and the 3 commissioners sit on the general board? Is that how you envision it?
No.
Do you have, back in 2013 when you attacked the EDC, there was at least an alternate plan in the form of another person and the alliance, which came into being and was, as far as I could tell, a creature of the commission, wholly devoted to the commission. Is there any plan to assuming that the funding does not go to EDC and their mission is impaired.
Well, if you think
Is
about
there a-
that 2013 when it was changed, one of the biggest problems was paying bonuses from public money. Paying bonuses, you know, when we did a contract 2 years ago with EDC, we took that out of there, so they cannot pay bonuses with public money. That was corrected.
That money, if I remember correctly, that was paid to the executive director was paid out of small business finance, which is a separate entity with a separate board and separate budget. He also, and that board contracts with the EDC to do some of the work that is necessary for them to be able to function.
Commissioner, if I could jump in here for just a
Well,
second.
I just have another question or two, Commissioner.
Well,
and then I'll be
actually,
happy
it
to-
has to do with the small business finance and the entanglement with Clay County Economic Development Council, and I only want to speak to that point. We have never seen any documents whatsoever that show us, that I recall, maybe they're there. I'm willing to stand corrected if they're there, but I've never seen any documents that show the clear line of delineation between funding for Economic Development Council and money and that they derive from their work, as opposed to small business development finance. So I question whether or not there is a true line of delineation. Was there money taken from the fee that we pay from our contract with Economic Development Council? Was it shifted over to small business finance so that there could be at least the shadow of a statement that it came from small business finance, but it really came from our funds? I don't know the answer to that. I think through walking through this process, that we'll have an opportunity to examine that. So I just wanted to speak to that point.
I do know the answer to that. The funding stream for the small business finance comes from fees and other monies paid by people who participate in the program.
Is it self-supporting?
It is self-supporting.
Is it
In fact,
money?
yes. In fact, what it does is it has a contract with EDC and it pays under $200,000 a year for the services of the EDC. So in fact, EDC derives money from the small business finance, not the reverse.
I would like to see that contract. Do you have a copy of it that you could share?
I would suggest you contact, I believe Tom Pryor would be the chairman of the Small Business Finance Committee. But having served on that committee, I can tell you that is the way it is. I mean, and also, like I say, when you talk to anybody at the EDC, they will acknowledge that very, very roughly their sources of income are roughly a third from the commission, from the county that is, about a third from the small business finance, and roughly a third from membership fees and other monies. So, no, small business finance, and again, showing up for meetings, you folks would know these things. They are in fact a recipient of money from small business finance, not the reverse. So I think that apprehension on your part as far as the 2013 issue is incorrect. I think that really was something of a red herring to mask the actual purpose behind the 2013 and now the 2016 action, which is to be able to either end or control the EDC. I think one of the things that is worth noting is at least in 2013 there was an alternate plan. If I choose not to resign from that board, then I assume that the funding will not follow. Therefore, EDC will be inhibited, will be hobbled by losing something around 1/3 of their funding, which is going to make economic development in this county much more difficult. Like I say, I mean, there seems to be no alternative plan. This whole my way or the highway kind of an attitude doesn't exactly lend itself to any kind of an agreement or any kind of open talks that would allow other people to express opinions. The thing is, if the presence of a commissioner on a board is a conflict of interest, we all belong on different boards. We all exert or I should say, we represent the interests of the taxpayers on those various boards. I don't swing my weight around. However, I do aggressively and will aggressively continue to represent the interests of the taxpayers of Clay County. While I'm not going to go and dictate, as was suggested by the Commission in 2013, to where the county would virtually be dictating policy. And in fact, the contracts that were submitted, as I said before, were so micromanaged that, in fact, it almost would cease to become an independent organization. So I would say that the swinging of weight, I don't know that there's a larger swing of weight that you can have than to cut off funding. So I would suggest that it's not myself who is trying to swing weight around, but the two commissioners who voted for that particular funding withdrawal. I mean, are we going to be back here in 3 more years, again arguing about EDC, and again threatening to take that money away? Are we going to go after the Missouri extension if they do something that you don't like? Are we, or that somebody does something that you cannot name but you do not like? At what point do we draw the line and say that there has to be some kind of accountability, but we cannot be threatening to pull funding? As far as I know, your concerns have not been raised with the EDC board, with the executive board, or anyone else that I'm aware of. So I mean, you've been holding on to this for I don't know how many months. I mean, now that you're safely reelected, it's available to you to do that.
Commissioner, may I raise a point of order?
You may.
According to our rules, we are supposed to be discussing the issue and not the motivation. The issue is conflict of interest, and I think we need to stay
No, the issue is
on
not conflict of interest. The issue is funding for the Clay County EDC.
Which really all this boils down to is you're saying that the motion was made in a budgetary meeting concerning conflict of interest as a contingency for funding. That's what this is all about. I mean, you may want to center on funding. The funding is not endangered so long as we can work out a conflict of interest.
As long as I do what I'm told. I can't, but how can I work out the conflict of interest when I don't know the nature of the conflict of interest?
Could you rule on the point of interest, on the point of order?
Yeah, your point of order is not well taken, because the premise was that we were discussing conflict of interest. We are in fact discussing funding for the Clay County EDC, so your point is not well taken.
Perhaps I should clarify my point of order. You keep going back to motives of an individual, and you've also referred to commissioners by name. According to our rules, you're not supposed to be referring to us by name. And secondly, you're supposed to stay on the point, the issue that is being discussed. The issue is the matter before us, not supposed motivation or personalities or anything of that nature. We're supposed to be centered upon what the motion is. And that is my point of order. Your discussion is devolving into personal attacks, into personal name calling, and to motivations behind an issue. Those are not the issue. The issue is the contingent funding of EDC based on a perceived conflict of interest and how we untangle that.
And what is that perceived conflict of interest?
That's not part of my point of order. My point of order is, are we going to stay on the issue?
The issue is not the conflict of interest. The issue is the funding for EDC, but you have made reference to the conflict of interest.
Are we going to stay on funding and conflict of interest? Or are we going to talk about motives?
Motives would be another way of saying the reasons we do things. Why do we do things? What is the reasoning behind that? The thing is, I think it is terribly irrelevant that when we talk about the funding for the EDC and we contemplate removing that funding, my opinion is that the EDC is entitled to a reason as to why that funding would be
Perhaps we
ceased.
need to refer this to the parliamentarian, because the rules are clear that the issue is to be discussed, but motives and personalities are not to be discussed.
Well, I think you're on a point of order, first of all. So I think.
And I ruled against that point of order.
Right, so you ruled against the point of order, so are you, I guess the approach is typically would be to take up that ruling of the chair. So I'm not.
So the next step would be if Commissioner Ridgeway wishes to challenge the ruling of the chair, is that correct?
That certainly would be the typical approach.
Now, she doesn't need to, but that certainly is her option and her.
It seems to me there's been a point of order made, there's been a ruling on that. So I'm not sure if you're asking me what's the next step to that process, or if you're asking me what our ordinances say about something that's specific.
Would you like the counselor to speak to the?
Well, let me just leave it as this. I would like for this conversation to rise above motivation and personal preference. And I would like it to center upon the actual policy that underlies this, which is the contingency of funding based on untangling a perceived conflict of interest. So with that, there's only so much I can do.
So, that is to say, any presiding commissioner, or is this personal in that it would be, it would be the presiding commissioner currently? What is your objection? I guess what I'm trying to ask is there an intrinsic conflict of interest that is attached to the office?
You're talking about funding from the EDC. We're not talking about cutting off the fund from the EDC. We're just talking about, when we do the new contract for the EDC, for 2017, I think everybody up here thinks that the EDC is doing a really good job, but there's a conflict of interest, and we want to straighten it out.
So the solution to resolve the perceived conflict of interest is to, if your demands are not met, then to take away the funding for EDC once again, as was done in 2013. Is that, that seems to be.
I don't know why you keep saying that, because we're not talking about taking away the funding of EDC. We're just saying we're going to wait until we get a new contract for 2017. And we'll put it in there that you don't go over there and swing the weight around and get the complaints that I've been getting about you.
Once again, I think we have delved into what Commissioner Ridgeway was referring to as personal attacks, referring to by persons, but I'll let that go. Again, it is hard to really, without giving any reasons. There is no reasoning behind this. There is nothing but what appears to be the sheer exercise of political power for reasons. You may. I'm sorry, is it okay, Commissioner?
I'm going to do the very best I can to be very succinct on this so that we can move forward.
Sure.
This is either a huge misunderstanding at best or a huge mischaracterization at worst. There is a fact that the presiding commissioner, along with one other person, was co-chair of the Strategic Development Committee or something of that nature for some period of time, which we would say that the strategy of the Economic Development Council had to be driven or at least directed or promoted in some way by the committee on which the presiding commissioner served. Co-chair of strategic development, and there's only two, I think lends itself to saying, if we were not developing the strategy of the Economic Development Council, then it was grossly misnamed. So, with regard to this particular issue, the presiding commissioner abstained concerning the economic development contract in 2015. That is a fact. Then in 2016, the presiding commissioner changed his position and voted for the contract. That is a fact. That is something changed, of which the majority of this commission is apparently not aware. Now, Clay County remains either 1/3 of the total funding, or we are their largest single donor to the Economic Development Council. That being the case, then I believe those facts taken together show the potential for a conflict of interest. The Economic Development Council is governed by humans. Humans have to constantly be thinking, where does my existence come from? My existence comes from my funding. If for some reason I don't follow what the Clay County Commission strongly suggests is a business that should be followed, or a business that should be denied support, then they have to realize that they may be risking 1/3 of their funding. That, to me, if I were an employee of the Economic Development Council, that would be of concern. As a result, I think there are other ways to resolve this in a very peaceful, professional manner. For example, we can look at perhaps having commission designees that do not vote directly on the budget, but that are economic development directors in the local community that specialize in this. Perhaps we can have our designees there. Now, you've made reference before, Commissioner, about serving on other boards. We don't serve on the DDRB. I do go to the park board from time to time, but I'm a non-voting member. I don't understand why that we can't spend a little bit of time between now and February, when the economic development contract comes forward to a vote, analyzing the potential for a conflict of interest. No one can deny that conflict of interest has been in the news from the president-elect all the way down to localities. It is a major topic of concern. People should rightly be concerned about that. Just because we're doing things the way they've always been done doesn't mean that the way they've always been done is the best way to do them. We always need to be looking for ways to make Clay County better, to make us more professional. As a result, in my view, this is a potential conflict of interest based on some facts that is being scrutinized. It is not an accusation. It is an investigation. We have until February to determine, does a conflict of interest exist? Is there a better way to do this? Can we do a better job distancing ourselves as voting members on the budget from any kind of direct voting membership in an outside organization that is supported in part by your own admission, 33%, I believe probably more than that, with taxpayer dollars? There just needs to be a line of demarcation. Perhaps it's already there and we're okay. But I agree with Commissioner Owen that now is the time before the contract comes out for us to fully vet this and analyze and work with our local economic development directors to determine, is there a better way to do this so that we don't put ourselves in a position of being accused of having a conflict of interest, or perhaps directing the activities of an outside organization that we fund at a bare minimum 33% with tax dollars. I would argue probably more than that. So this gives us a bit of a reprieve and a breathing time to be able to analyze a potential conflict of interest, to analyze potential options for resolving any such perceived conflict of interest. It is not a denial of funding. It is not a complaint against the Economic Development Council. It is us doing the proper self-examination and the proper policing of our own contracts when those contracts are being used with taxpayer money to fund an outside organization. That's all it is. No more, no less. It gives us time. And with that,
I would first off say that reading the motion, this is not a negotiation, this is a demand. EDC is an organization like many others, like ourselves, we are currently going through the budget process. They are currently going through the budgeting process. So what that means is we are going to suspend, or at least put in doubt, 1/3 of their budget during their budgeting process. It would be impossible for us to function as a government if we had to sit down at this very moment and we found out that 1/3 of the revenue coming into this county is going to disappear. That would play havoc with our ability to budget. I don't know how EDC sits down and budgets in that kind of an atmosphere. Secondarily, when I became the co-chair, I was not presiding commissioner. That was prior to that service. I have since left that board, left that position, the reason being, it was never meant to be a permanent spot for any one person. It was meant to be the ability to give direction to and suggestions to the executive board. And the idea of periodically turning over membership seemed like a good way to refresh our ability to do the work with new ideas. You said potential conflict of interest, and that there was an investigation, that this was an investigation. It's an interesting investigation that does not include questioning anyone who has any information on it. Still, what is the conflict? I'm still waiting here. It's potentially there. It's maybe. It's maybe. And for that maybe, we are going to pull the rug out from under EDC. Have you expressed these concerns to the executive board or to the executive director or anyone else on EDC?
Commissioner, I'm looking at the time. When we started, we said that we were going to spend between 15 and 20 minutes. We've now spent over 33% more time than that on this issue. The only people who have spoken on this are the 3 commissioners who are going to be here regularly. As a result, I would move that we table the issue until January 3rd, 2017, so that people who are waiting their turn on the agenda, we can get to them.
I don't know if you can table a discussion item. It's not an issue, so it's not like an ordinance or a resolution. And I will wrap up here quickly. I just wanted to respond to the other points you made, and then I'm prepared to conclude the discussion.
Can I withdraw my motion?
Thank you.
Pending the understanding that we are going to move promptly to the agenda.
I understand your
Thank you.
threat. The idea of designees, I think,
Seriously?
is seriously.
I mean,
You're going to, so if I don't end up, you're going to be pulling it again. Again, I do intend, because I do want to move on. So give me a couple of moments more, I will finish it up, and unless there's some reason for further discussion, I am prepared to move on to the next item on the agenda. Designees, we're talking about safeguarding a large amount of money that the county is investing. I think designees, first off, downgrades the amount of oversight that we are exercising. You talked about some of the other boards and commissions. Those are advisory boards that don't have the power to spend money by and large, with the exception of DDRB and some of the others. Once again, the MU extension is another example of an outside agency that we fund. Like I said, this is, I believe, not so much to do with myself, not so much to do with the executive director who was under attack in 2013. It is my contention that this is a way for the commission to once again gain control of an organization that I believe is doing a lot of good work. And I would strongly urge the commissioners to attend meetings and to see for themselves how the EDC works. Clearly, this discussion has demonstrated that there is a fundamental lack of understanding of both structure and function of EDC and the affiliate organization, the Small Business Finance Group. With that, are there any further items under that discussion, or any further comments in that discussion? Commissioner Owen?